Protocol kept men breathing, they said, yet the night it mattered, I shelved it like an outdated map. Berlin in '62 reeked of wet concrete and burnt dossiers. The air tasted of things we promised to forget. I spent my days translating intercepted chatter, pretending information was sterile. After midnight, the city hummed a different language, one written in footsteps that never reached reports. When a scrambled call slipped through on a forbidden channel, it addressed me by a name buried under 4 layers of cover. I should have logged it, woken superiors, filed forms. Instead, I listened. Curiosity? Guilt? Maybe I wanted proof the machine could bleed too. That single breath of hesitation tilted lives off their axles, mine included. Orders decayed into suggestions, allies blurred, and the wall outside seemed polite enough to watch me drown. I've stayed quiet longer than some governments last, carrying memories like poison stitched into an old coat. Tonight, I cut the seams. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but I'm telling you anyway. Before I regret this, hit like, subscribe. If discomfort's your habit, and tell me your city and the hour. Secrets crave witnesses better, that then dying unheard alone out there. Berlin doesn't sleep after midnight. It mutters. I sat hunched over the gray console inside the concrete shell they called Bravo Station, headphones licking my ears with static. Regulations said we monitored East Block frequencies only, logged every anomaly, passed it up the chain. At 2:11, wavelength stuttered 3 clicks, a drag of silence, and my cover name, spoken in English so plain it felt foreign. Whitaker, copy. No authentication code, no call sign, just my ghost of a name. I froze, pen hovering above the ledger. Protocol screamed flag, record, alert. Instead, I eased the gain and answered with a single measured click. Action. Broken rule number 1. While the others dozed against empty coffee cups, I traced the signal through the oscilloscope. It bounced off a repeater in Potsdam, disguised, behind Soviet weather chatter. Whoever dialed knew our blind corners. My head wallpapered itself with questions. Was this Langley testing loyalty? A Stasi honey trap? I'd spent years preaching security like scripture. Now curiosity bit me like wet rebar. The voice returned, softer, intimate. Priority 7, Blackbird to roost. That phrase belonged to a dead file from Budapest, shut 2 winters back. Dead files aren't supposed to talk. My knuckles whitened around the gain knob, and the heartbeat under my ribs punched faster than the metronome of the teletype. I needed corroboration, but the night crew were green kids taught never to improvise. Waking them would send it straight into the morning brief and bury it under 10 committees. So I pulled the reel-to-reel feed, spooled a fresh tape, and isolated the band. The signal flared again, this time a string of number cipher groups matching an obsolete one-time pad. I'd burned months ago. Someone had kept a copy, or expected me to. Betrayal tastes like old paper. Using a dead pad is an invitation to disaster. I scribbled the blocks into my pocket notebook, feeling the weight of every graphite line. Evidence now existed only in my shaky handwriting, unofficial, unprotected, undeniably mine. The transmission ended with 4 short beeps, a signature for sign-offs when an operation was compromised. Then nothing but East German weather again. The room seemed smaller, as if the walls inhaled. I unplugged the headphones, listened to the real silence water pipes, distant sirens, the hum of a city partitioned by ideology and bad faith. I tucked the notebook into the lining of my field jacket, where a previous hole made a convenient slit. Once you hide something on your own body, you confess it's worth stealing. I wasn't certain whose side I would be stealing from. A clock started ticking inside me, louder than any alarm dot. At 2:24, I signed out for a routine perimeter check, lying straight-faced to the corporal on duty. Outside, The air was sharp, the wall a black seam against weak moonlight. I rehearsed, the numbers in my head, afraid ink might betray me if searched. Every step across the courtyard felt like trading one crime for another. I caught my reflection in a dark window uniform straight, eyes ragged, a man already an accomplice to something undefined. I reached the outer gate, where the guard logged my exit time without comment. Bureaucracy is a perfect accomplice. It records everything yet understands nothing. The guard's pen slipped, blotting my name into an inky blur. A bad omen or a gift? By the time I stepped into the empty street beyond the floodlights, the ledger inside Bravo Station already lied about who had walked into the night and why lies. I've learned breed quicker than truth, and that's when I realized the call had done more than summon me. It had amputated me from the protocol I'd worshipped. The signal still echoed in my ears. Whitaker, copy. I wish I'd answered no and left it there. Some nights, even silence leaves fingerprints on the spine of the city. Then those prints were already on me from that moment. But if wishes mattered, the wall would have been paper thin. Sunrise leaked through the slats of the blackout blinds, turning the cigarette haze inside Bravo Station the color of cheap whiskey. I still hadn't slept. The reel-to-reel ticked behind me like an impatient heart, while the corporal brewed another pot of coffee he'd never finish. Protocol demanded I log everything before the day shift relieved us. Instead, I rewound in tape, snipped the last 3 minutes, and slipped the ribbon into my pocket notebook. Action, confession, same gesture. The corporal asked if the line had been quiet. I nodded yes, sealing my first official lie to an American uniform. Part of me waited for sirens. Berlin, however, offered only its ordinary chorus of idling trucks and distant church bells. I found a payphone near the tram stop on Kochstrasse, the kind whose metal booth smelled of old rain and cheap perfume. With a trembling finger, I dialed the cutout line to Langley's duty desk, ready to report an anomaly in sanitized language. No tone, dead air. Either the line was jammed or someone wanted it that way. The numbers from the broadcast burned inside my head, so I tried them as a cipher key against memory. They translated to a single sentence. Proceed Kreuzberg 1900-hour solo. Orders without signatures are bullets without fingerprints. They travel just as fast, kill just as clean. The booth door creaked open behind me. A woman stepped in, umbrella dripping, eyes blank with morning fatigue. I ended the call that never connected and stepped out, the tape fragment warm against my chest. Across the street, East German construction workers hammered at the skeleton of a new propaganda board, red slogans catching the wet light. I wondered if any of them had family on this side, if splinters of Forbidden's voices kept them awake too. Paranoia isn't a mood in Berlin, it's the weather. Back at Bravo Station, the day shift had taken over, pressed uniforms and fresh optimism. Lieutenant Harker waved a brown envelope at me, same size we used for low-level field tasks. Came by courier, no return. His grin suggested mundane paperwork, but my stomach folded. Inside lay typed instructions scheduling me for a night. Perimeter audit in Kreuzberg, precisely 1900. No signature, no routing form, just a stamped seal of the U.S. mission. Whoever forged it knew our clerical quirks. Wrong font on the date line, bright coffee stain in the corner. Harker signed the receipt himself and left me holding the envelope like a loaded pistol. I slipped away to the restroom, locking the door, faucet running to mask paper rustle. Comparing the courier sheet with my notebook, I confirmed the coordinates matched. 2 sources, one illegal, one semi-official pointing the same direction. Coincidence is rarer than loyalty. My reflection in the cracked mirror looked 50, though I was barely 34. I asked it whether disobedience multiplied or divided the danger. The mirror fogged, refusing algebra dot at 1830 hours. I signed out a sedan under the pretext of mapping new patrol routes. The motor pool sergeant jotted the plate number without raising an eyebrow. Bureaucracy again, my unwitting accomplice. I rehearsed. A cover story training exercise, radio calibration, anything, but the lies felt flimsier than the windshield wipers smearing drizzle across glass. By 1855, I parked near the canal, heart-thumping time against the dashboard clock. Raindrops drummed the roof like keys testing locks.KREUZBERG after dark smelled of coal smoke and fear disguised as industry. Pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas, silhouettes flickering in arc lamp halos. I clutched the courier envelope, still. Sealed, still damning. Instinct told me to burn it. Forget the broadcast, file a sanitized memo. But instinct also reminded me how many men vanished after following protocol to the letter. I chose the devil I hadn't met yet. A tram bell clanged somewhere behind me, and in the momentary hush afterward, I felt watched. Down the block a figure lingered beneath a flickering street lamp, hat brim low, cigarette ember glowing and fading. When the tram screeched anew, the figure was gone. Maybe surveillance, maybe imagination. Berlin kindly offers both at discount. My watch ticked to 1900. I stepped into the rain, envelope undercoat, ready to betray someone. I just didn't know whom yet. The night listened. Berlin breathes through its concrete lungs, and tonight its exhale tasted of diesel, wet plaster, and unasked questions. Street lamps hissed like anxious cats. I left the sedan where the courier note specified an unlit side street skirting Gritzer Park and stepped onto pavement slick enough to mirror the wall's distant floodlights. Each footfall sounded louder than it should. Action felt reckless, but inaction felt terminal. A lone bicyclist coasted past, tires hissing. He whistled, "Mac the knife," too jaunty for this hour, and I marked the tune as cipher or paranoia. As he vanished, the city inhaled again, drawing curtains tighter, bending neon until every window became a surveillance lens. My brief called the neighborhood politically volatile. Locals just called it home. Tonight, Kreuzberg called me foreign in every sense. I tucked the envelope deeper under my coat, paper alive against my ribs. Half a block north stood the tenement whose address matched a decoded fragment. 3 floors, chipped yellow paint, single dim bulb above the door. While I lurked in its shadow, a tram rumbled through the intersection, sparks spraying frozen cables, washing the facade in blue light. The bulb flickered, revealing a notice. Elektrizit Gespert Zahlungsverzug. If Langley arranged. This, they'd chosen a building without power, cameras, maybe even tenants smart. Unless someone else had chosen it first. Inside, the stairwell smelled of boiled cabbage and kerosene. I climbed carefully, counting creaks, memorizing exit angles. 2nd floor landing. Graffiti of a heart split by barbed wire. I wondered whether the artist knew how literal that looked from checkpoint parapets. 3rd floor. A door ajar, light leaking from a storm lantern set on the floorboards. I entered, holster unlatched. The flat was stripped bare, no furniture. No photographs, just walls pocked by rusted nails. In the center, one sagging chair waited like an improvised altar, cane seat split, its presence too deliberate to be accidental. Dust motes drifted in the lantern glow, each a fleck of someone else's memory left behind. My boots scuffed plaster rubble. The sound echoed as if the room itself were hollow, remembering lives evacuated in a hurry. I set the envelope atop that chair and exhaled. A voice with no body greeted me. "You're early, Major." American accent, amused. Sound bounced around the gutted room, impossible to place. Action. I laid the envelope on the chair, seal unbroken. Thought. If genuine, I needed a countersign challenge, but countersigns belonged to systems. This moment belonged to improvisation. You kept the numbers, the voice continued. That means you remember Budapest. Twist. Budapest was classified beyond my clearance, yet here it was, thrown in my conscience. I recalled rumors, snow, a bridge, a body, but never lived them. The speaker believed otherwise. Consequence. My sense of self wobbled, as though dossiers held a version of me I'd never met. I demanded visual confirmation. The lantern dimmed, then brightened. Someone had adjusted the wick remotely. Childish theatrics or coded reply. I edged toward the radio wired to the mic, intent on tracing the cable, when footsteps echoed downstairs, heavy, purposeful, more than one set. The microphone hissed off. I shoved the envelope inside the radio case and killed the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. Only tubes glowed like dying coals. Boots hit the landing. German voices barked. Not Stasi, local police. Why police? The radio crackled a final time. They're not here for me, Whitaker. They're here for you. Chairs scraped, guns cocked. I pressed my back to the window frame, fingers searching for the latch. Rust held it fast. Below, 3 stories of empty air and trash cans promised broken bones or freedom. Doorknobs rattled. I faced a decision colder than the Danube in those. Half-remembered Budapest files. Surrender to uniforms who wouldn't know which master they served, or jump into a night that already knew too much about me. The city waited, rain honing its claws. Whichever choice I made, Kreuzberg would keep breathing suspicion long after my own lungs stilled. And that's when I understood. The order I'd obeyed was never written because it wasn't meant to survive paperwork. Only I was, for now. But the next breath the city takes might coincide with my last exhale, and the station logs would deny everything afterward. I waited 10 full minutes before moving. The boots retreated downstairs, echo hollow, like someone replaying fear just to test the sound. I stayed frozen in the dark long after they'd gone. Habit, mostly. Protocol once drilled into us that hesitation could be fatal. Irony is, sometimes it's the only thing that keeps you alive. When I finally pried open the window, rain hit my face like a slap. The alley below offered no clean exit, just dumpsters, puddles, and a stray cat chewing on something that looked too human to guess at. I slipped out and landed hard, ankle barking. Nothing broken, but I limped. The envelope inside the radio casing dug against my side. Berlin pressed in from all sides, gutted buildings, wet cobblestone, flickering signage that read like warnings instead of advertisements. I took side streets, keeping low, circling aimlessly, stalling the next step I knew was coming. The plan, if you could call it, that was to return to the fallback cafe, not official. Just a place agents used when everything else frayed. I reached it past midnight. Caf Kranzler, the red awning peeled at the corners. Only 2 tables occupied. A woman smoked by the window, blonde, late 30s, eyes like ice picks. I'd never seen her before, but she raised her cup like a toast. Action. I entered, slid into her booth without a word. Her voice was calm, American, wrong. Langley sends its thanks, she said, as if we were post-coital, not mid-breach. My spine tensed. No codes exchanged. No signals. No mention of Budapest. Just assumption. Familiarity and danger. Thought, either she was lying or I was missing a briefing bigger than my clearance. She passed me a napkin. On it, wait for tram 13, follow the man in gray. No signature, no ink. Just pencil, as if she expected I'd burn it. Her hand brushed mine, slipped something into my palm. A key. Twist, not a hotel key, but to a post box. Cold brass, number etched with acid. 417. Consequence, There was no way to know what I'd just accepted: orders, bait, or punishment. I stood, nodded once. She stayed seated, stirring an empty cup. When I reached the street, tram 13 clattered. Passed, right on time. A man in gray disembarked, mid-50s, tall, stiff shoulders, hat pulled low. I followed, limping a step behind, breathing the rhythm of the city so I wouldn't lose him in its pulse. He led me east, not speaking. We crossed 2 canals, past a bakery still steaming from the ovens, and ducked through an alley that felt too deliberate. Then he stopped at a door graffitied rust around the handle. He knocked 3 times, patterned, familiar. That door didn't belong on the itinerary. Not in any version I'd seen. He opened it and waved me in. I hesitated, then stepped through, because the first rule of this game is, if someone wants you inside, you're already in danger whether you enter or not. Inside, the air was warm, dusty. Bookshelves lined the walls. Maps, foreign stamps, a half-burned candle on a crate. The man took off his hat. He had American eyes, but a Soviet haircut. "You brought it?" he asked. "Just that." Not "what happened?" or "are you hurt?" Just business. That's when I asked who he was. His answer: Langley. Technically. That word technically snapped something in me. I reached for my holster. He didn't flinch. "You want truth, Whitaker?" he said. "Then sit down. Because the people who gave you orders tonight, they're not on your side anymore." A shiver traced my spine. The envelope burned through the lining of my coat. I was either a courier of truth or a pawn in someone's cleanup job. Berlin didn't care. It just kept breathing. And I had just stepped into the lungs of something larger than protocol. I should have burned it. That envelope had weight beyond its paper, like it knew what it carried. I sat across from the man in gray, the room quiet but charged. He leaned back, waiting, letting silence do the interrogation. That's a tactic we use too. I opened my coat, pulled out the radio casing, and placed it between us. The man's eyes didn't move. He simply said, "Open it. You need to see it before they do." I didn't ask who they were. The truth already pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. I unlatched the casing, reached inside, and peeled back the flap of the envelope. No wax, no seal, just adhesive that had begun to dry with time. That alone told me it wasn't meant to be passed along unopened. It was meant for someone who didn't follow rules. Someone like me. Inside, 3 typed pages, 1 photo, and a torn matchbook from a bar in Friedrichshain. I scanned the photo first. Blurry, black and white. A group of men seated in a bar, 2 in Soviet uniforms, 1 in civilian clothes with his back to the camera. And the 4th man was unmistakable. It was Robert Howe, my supervisor in Berlin Station. Smiling. Action. My hand clenched before I knew it. Thought. Halle had never left the American sector, at least not on paper. The document under the photo was a list of operations he'd greenlit. Some I knew. Most I didn't. Some were cross-border surveillance ops, ... And some were marked with Soviet flags. Twist. One operation was codenamed Silver Choir. It had been officially terminated in late '61 after a failed infiltration into the GDR's nuclear archives. I remember filing the closure myself. But this document dated new activity just a month ago. Hale's signature was at the bottom. Real or forged, I couldn't tell. And that's what scared me more. The man in gray watched me. "Now you understand?" he said. "That file shouldn't exist, but it does. You weren't meant to carry it. Someone rerouted it through you." I asked the only question that mattered. "Why me?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Because you're expendable, but not yet burnt. They needed someone obedient enough to follow the call, smart enough to survive the handoff, and dumb enough not to realize he was the delivery system for an internal purge. Consequence, I felt my stomach hollow out. The matchbook fell from my lap, landing face up. The bar no longer existed. I remembered the file. It had been bombed out in '58, but the address was still listed inside. A meeting point? A trap? Or maybe just a cruel reminder that the timeline I trusted was full of holes. I gathered the pages, the photo, the matchbook. My hands trembled. "You said Langley." "Technically," I muttered. He nodded. "I said technically because I'm part of a compartment you don't report to. Neither does Holly. And someone wants us to cancel each other out before this ever sees." Sunlight, I stood. The file didn't explain everything, but it explained enough. Enough to know I was now a threat to every side that had once called me useful. Enough to know that whatever I did next wouldn't be about orders. It would be about survival and memory. The man in gray didn't follow me out. He didn't need to. He'd done his part. The rest was mine to carry. And the envelope, now a dead weight in my coat, had rewritten the shape of Berlin in my mind. All eyes turned to shadows. Structures turned to smoke. And protocol, that sacred doctrine I once revered, had just been torn apart by a photograph that shouldn't exist. I stepped into the rain again. But it didn't feel like cleansing. It felt like someone rinsing away evidence before it could stain history. And I was still holding what refused to be forgotten. I didn't go back to Bravo Station. Not that night. Instead, I wandered Berlin. Like a ghost dragging the weight of names I wasn't supposed to know. I ducked into a phone booth 2 blocks past Gendarme and Mart, the kind that still smelled of rust and rotting tobacco. I dialed a secure line only to hear a second click halfway. Through the ring. Someone else had already tapped it. I hung up. Fast. Action. I knew now I was being watched either by the people I used to trust or the ones who never trusted me in the first place. Got the matchbook from Friedrichshain buzzed in my pocket like a curse. I considered throwing it into the gutter, but something about the date on the inside cover wouldn't let go. Verse 3/1900H, 3 nights from now. A time and place, not a trap, not yet. Thought. Someone was still running this operation from inside. Someone who'd used me to bypass Hale's control, maybe even Langley's. I found shelter in an old safe house we used during the early days above. A closed-down record shop near Cottbusser Tor. It hadn't been checked in years. Dust lay thick on the floor. The air was dry, almost too dry, like someone else had recently aired it out. The kind of dryness that suggests preparation, not abandonment. I didn't sleep. I read and reread the file until the names blurred out at sunrise. I felt it before I saw it. The window had shifted, not broken shifted. A millimeter off. Someone had been in, but nothing was missing. Just added dot there, folded neatly atop the old desk drawer. A second envelope, smaller, cream-colored, no markings. No address dot inside. A photo of me, taken 2 nights ago, stepping out of Bravo Station with the radio case under my coat. Twist. On the back, written in clean block letters, it read, "You're not the only one running." Consequence. I sat back hard, the chair creaking like a shot. There was a second mole, or maybe I was the second. The idea that this web extended beyond Hall, that another hand had guided the transmission, the forged courier letter, the meet with the man in gray, it turned my gut dot, and the knock came. 3 times. Paused. 2 more. The old field code. Not one we used in Berlin. One we used in Istanbul. I didn't move. Another knock. And a voice whispered, but urgent. Urgent. "I'm not here to arrest you, but I need to talk, please." I cracked the door. A woman stood outside. Early 40s. Wet hair. trench coat unbuttoned. She looked exhausted but alert. Field trained. American Dot, she said her name was Ward, claimed. She was agency stationed in Vienna until last month. Claimed she'd intercepted a request for my termination. I don't know who sent it, she said. But your face is on a bulletin in Langley's restricted systems. Someone tagged you liability active knowledge? She opened her coat not to draw a weapon, but to show a folded paper. She tossed it on the table. Dot. It was the same photo. Of me from the envelope. Dot. Different handwriting, different ink. That's when I understood. The leaks weren't flowing one direction. This wasn't betrayal. It was bleed. A hemorrhage across both sides of the wall. No one trusted anyone anymore. Orders contradicted each other. Files crossed. People disappeared. The question wasn't who the traitor was. It was, who wasn't? Ward looked me in the eye. You want out, Whitaker? You're going to need to start choosing which lies you can live with. And that's when I realized this wasn't just an escape. It was a trap we were building for ourselves. From the inside. Treptower Park at night is the kind of place where silence grows roots. The stone soldiers watching from the Soviet memorial don't blink, don't breathe, but they remember. I arrived early, always early now, and waited on the bench, marked by the second matchbook Ward had handed me before disappearing again. We hadn't spoken since that morning in the safe house. She'd warned me once. That was enough. Action. I wore civilian clothes. Slouched posture. I let my coat sag to hide the shoulder holster, but my hand never strayed far from it. I'd already scanned the path twice. No tails, no familiar shadows. Still, I didn't trust the quiet. That much peace in Berlin meant something had been cleared, either by fear or permission. At 1902, a man stepped out from behind the statue. Tall, Eastern coat, familiar gait. His eyes found me in one movement, and then softly, Whitaker. That was the first fracture. He used my real name, not the cover, not the code, and his accent, Russian. But not military Russian. Diplomatic Russian. Smooth. Too smooth. He sat down beside me as if we'd done this for years. You have the envelope? He asked, without looking at me. I did. I passed it without a word, folded in a newspaper. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, thought he was scared. Not of me, of what was inside. That kind of fear doesn't fake itself. He scanned it quickly, too quickly to process. He already knew what it contained. Twist. He didn't say thank you. He said, I'm sorry. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't an exchange. It was a burial. I was told I'd be meeting a Langley asset, I said carefully. He nodded. You were. But that was 2 nights ago. That plan's broken now. He pulled something from his coat. Not a weapon. A cassette tape, unmarked. He offered it with both hands. It's the other side of what you carried, he said. Proof. For leverage. Or for suicide. Depends on what you choose next. I didn't take it immediately. Consequence. I hesitated, and in that moment, he whispered something that still claws at me. You're not being hunted because you know. You're being hunted because you could talk. That's worse. I asked him his name. He didn't give one. Instead, he stood. You're already listed as missing in Langley's system. Don't go back. Don't call anyone. Just disappear. He turned, walked toward the eastern tree line where the fog curled thick like breath from a dying animal. And before he vanished, he said it again over his shoulder, almost kindly. I'm sorry. I held the tape, still warm from his pocket. And then I realized something far worse. No cameras. No witnesses. No file trail. That wasn't a meeting. That was a handoff before erasure. I looked around at the stone figures, the empty benches, the trees arching like silent judges, and I knew no one would believe this happened. Not Langley. Not Moscow. Not even me in a few years. But the tape. The tape was real, and it was ticking like a landmine, just waiting for a reason to go off. Didn't know where else to go, There are moments in a spy's life where every map is useless. Every contact's name turns into a question mark. Every key you still carry fits a door that no longer exists. That's where I was when I walked back toward Bravo Station just before dawn. Limping, coat soaked. The cassette in my pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. I told myself I'd stop a block short, observe, walk away. ID in single quotes T. Action. I crossed the security gate at 5:38, the same gate I'd passed 100 times. The guard on duty didn't flinch, didn't ask where I'd been, just nodded and logged me in. Thought either he'd been instructed not to question me, or someone had erased the reason to do so. Inside, everything looked the same dull. Lighting, same burnt coffee smell, same stack of communiques sitting on Harker's desk. But something was off, subtle, the way silence clung to the walls. Like the building itself was holding its breath. I went to the comms room mine, technically, and there it was. The reel-to-reel I'd used to record the transmission 3 nights ago. Wiped. Twist. Not corrupted. Not overwritten. Wiped. Clean. No log entries for that night. The entire shift erased from the ledger. Even my own name. That's when the internal phone rang. I didn't answer. I waited. 5 rings. Silence. Then a voice through the intercom. Harker. Whitaker. I need a word. His tone didn't match the words. It wasn't friendly. Wasn't angry. Just hollow. Like something already decided. I took the back hallway to his office. No one else in sight. The place felt abandoned, like a shell left behind after the creature moves on. He sat behind his desk, not even pretending to shuffle papers. No folders, no files. Just him, a black rotary phone, and a coffee mug with a chip at the rim. Where've you been? He asked. I said. Field check ran long. He smiled. Not amused, just tired. We lost a courier last night, he said. Near Treptower Park. I didn't blink, didn't breathe. He went on. No witnesses. No body yet. Just an unmarked vehicle and blood on the gravel. I asked what it had to do with me. Nothing, he said. Unless you think it does. Consequence. We stared at each other. Long. Quiet. I realized then that Harker knew everything. Or nothing. There was no in-between. He motioned to a sealed envelope on the desk. Transfer papers. You're being reassigned. Tonight. I opened the flap. No location, no title. Just a one-way flight out of Tempelhof, and a note that said, per HQ request. No debrief necessary. That wasn't protocol. That was disposal. Still, I nodded, took the papers, walked out. No alarms. No security detail. No questions. Just air. As I exited the station, a corporal passed me without eye contact. Slipped something into my hand fast. Practiced. I didn't open it until I was 2 blocks away. It was a matchbook. Not from Friedrichshain. This one said Heidelberg. Inside, a note. You weren't supposed to return. The file is still in motion. I looked up. The city still gray from dawn. And I realized Berlin wasn't done with me. It just refused to acknowledge I'd ever been there. I wasn't invisible yet, but I was fading. After the reassignment notice, I was told to maintain normal operations for another 48 hours, just long enough to let the paper trail die slowly. I went back to my barracks, shaved, ironed my uniform, walked the halls like a man still pretending to have a future. That's what we do, after all. We walk like we still belong. until no one remembers we were walking at all. But then there was Nolan. Action. He passed me in the hallway that afternoon, eyes darting like a rat caught under a light. Nolan and I had worked side by side for almost 2 years, same comes room, same rotations, same late-night whiskey when the world got too loud. He used to call me Wit like it meant something. That day, he didn't say a word, just nodded once, tight, like he was counting how many seconds it took to get out of my proximity. Thought someone had told him something. Or worse, he'd seen something himself. Maybe he found the blank tape. Maybe he was the one who wiped it. I followed him. Not far. Just enough to confirm he'd switched shifts. He wasn't in night duty anymore. He'd moved to logistics, where files are locked and movement is logged twice. That wasn't a promotion. That was containment. I waited until he left for the day. I broke into his locker. Inside. Nothing personal. Just pressed uniforms, an old copy of Stars and Stripes, and a new keycard tucked inside a sock. I took it, copied it, returned it, carefully. Twist. That night, I used the copy to access Level 3, the secure archive. Only clearance holders were supposed to be there. No cameras, no records. But the door logs? They don't lie. And Nolan had been inside 3 times in the past week. Searched the shelf he'd last accessed. Found it. A thin red folder marked Baltic Intersect. Not my operation, not even my region. But inside were logs with my name as field contact. My signature for documents I never signed. For meetings I never had. They'd backdated my presence into operations I couldn't possibly have touched. Twist upon twist, they were building a new version of me, one that could vanish without explanation. I left the file untouched, put everything back, walked out, but as I reached the end of the hallway, Nolan was there, leaning against the wall. He didn't draw a weapon, didn't raise his voice, just said quietly, "I didn't ask for it, Whitaker. They gave me your file. Told me to prepare it for redundancy." That word, it snapped something inside me. Consequence. I asked him what he'd seen. He just shook his head. Enough to know they're scared, not of what you've done, but of what you still might remember. I asked him if he believed the file. He didn't answer. He just stepped aside and whispered, "They already erased you from the system. Just don't give them a reason to make it permanent." Then he walked away. That was the last time I saw him. And that's when I knew I wasn't just being followed. I was being replaced. It came over the radio like a traffic report, flat voice. Coded channel 0 emotion. Subject 12 confirmed. Extraction failed. Local authorities logged it as self-harm. That was all they said. But I recognized the tone, the rhythm. The words weren't for everyone. They were for us. And Subject 12 wasn't just a number. It was the man from Treptower Park. The one who called me Whitaker with real weight in his voice. The one who gave me the cassette. The one who handed me the truth like a diseased action. I left Bravo. Station mid-shift. Faked a nosebleed. Ducked out through the fire exit. Stole a bike someone left chained outside the back fence. Rode 3 miles in the rain. To the canal. Where the body had been found. It wasn't in the papers. Of course not. But I had contacts, people who still owed favors. A medic at the morgue let me in for 2 minutes. The man's face was swollen, pale, but it was him. No ID, no fingerprints in the system, no report filed. Just a tag on his toe, and a note clipped to his collar. Do not process. Hold for military instruction. I opened the drawer and found something else tucked under the sheet. A slip of paper, folded twice. Inside, a phrase written in the same neat block letters I'd seen before. The tape is not the only copy. Twist. That meant someone else knew. Someone he had trusted. which meant whoever killed him hadn't gotten everything they came for. Consequence, they'd keep looking. And if they traced it back to me, well, I'd already used up every excuse. I returned to my flat and tore the place apart. Found the hidden cassette. Checked it for tampering. Number. Sign of damage. But something felt off. Paranoia isn't an affliction in this line of work, it's protocol. I slipped the tape into a spare deck and hit play. Nothing. 10 seconds of silence. Then static. Then his voice. One line. Whitaker, if you're hearing this, someone in Langley already thinks you're dead. Click. End of recording. That's it. Not the proof I expected. Not a confession. Not a map. Just confirmation that the clock had already started ticking. And then came the list. Every Thursday, we received a classified roster of missing or compromised assets. Most were aliases, names we'd learned to ignore. But this one had a new entry. A civilian alias I didn't recognize until I checked the footnote. Known associate of asset Whitaker. That was Ward. Gone. Just like that. I stared at the report so long I didn't hear the knock at my door. 3 sharp raps. Then silence. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. My gun lay on the table. And the cassette? It was still playing nothing at all. That's when I realized the next name on that list might not be mine, but it would be someone I trusted, and there weren't many of those left. I received the summons via pouch, no phone call, no formal cable. Just a sealed envelope slid under my door before dawn. That's how you know it's serious. That and the fact it wasn't signed. Just a location, Tempelhof Air Base. A time, civilian clothes required. I knew what that meant. Action. I showed up wearing the same overcoat I'd worn that first night. The lining still held dust from the canal bench. My boots hadn't dried properly since the morgue. I looked like hell. I wanted to. At the gate, the military escort didn't ask my name. Just scanned a list, nodded, and waved me through. Inside, the hangar had been converted into an improvised debriefing chamber. 2 chairs, a table, and a single manila folder already open. Across from me sat a man I'd never met. Thin, mid-40s, southern drawl polished to neutrality. He introduced himself as Internal Affairs, but never offered a badge or a clearance level. "You've been moved out of Berlin," he said flatly, effective immediately. I asked why. He smiled like that question hadn't been relevant in years. "Operational fog," he said. "You understand." Thought. Fog is what they call it when the official narrative gets too crowded to hold the truth. Then he handed me a document, not a report. A declaration. Pre-typed. All it needed was my signature. It said I'd never received any unauthorized communication, that I'd never intercepted or reviewed unvetted intelligence, that no contact had occurred with foreign assets beyond approved scope. It was 3 pages of silence, dressed up as clarity. I flipped to the last page and found a signature already printed beneath mine. Hale's twist. They'd already decided I'd agreed. My job now was to prove them right. Consequence. I signed. I didn't hesitate. Because I knew better. Not signing would trigger an investigation. Signing would erase me. Cleanly. I chose erasure. They handed me my ticket, one way to Madrid. Temporary liaison role, they called it. No fieldwork, no clearance. No return to Berlin. At the exit, I paused, looked back at the hangar, at the folder still sitting open on the table. I asked the man one question before I left. "Is this about the tape?" He didn't blink, just closed the folder and said, "What tape?" That should have been the end of it. But the city doesn't forget. Because a week later, I received a letter. No return address. Postmarked in Berlin. Typed on a ribbon machine no one used anymore. Inside, Just a photo.me. Sitting at Treptower Park. Beside the man who handed me the cassette. Neither of us. Smiling. Just watching the fog. On the back. A single sentence. Erase what you want. We still remember. I'm writing this from a room that doesn't belong to me. Rented under a name that never existed. In a city where I've never lived. Somewhere warm, quiet, sunlit, the kind of place where truth dries out faster than blood. I don't check the windows anymore. I already know what's out there. Action. The cassette lies on the table, unlabeled. I haven't played it again. Maybe I should have. Maybe it never mattered. The real tape, the dangerous one, the one they killed for, is memory. And memory doesn't rewind. I've rehearsed this confession 100 times. Stripped of details, smoothed over. A version I could live with, but I never got to live with it. Thought. The people I trusted either vanished or signed me away. The file I carried, the one that broke protocol wide open, it never made it to the archive. It was never meant to. That envelope was a weapon disguised as information. And I was the courier who thought he could still choose the target. Twist. In the end, I wasn't erased. Not completely. Someone kept the photo. Someone sent the letter. Someone wants me to remember. Or wants me to suffer for it. And maybe this stupid attempt to tell it all is part of that plan. Consequence. I know I won't be found with R. I know my obituary will be blank. I know Nolan probably read this once and filed it under unreliable. But I also know this. There was a night in Berlin when I broke protocol, and the world shifted. Just slightly. It didn't start a war. Didn't save a life. Didn't make history. But it left a mark. And maybe that's enough. Maybe one man remembering is the closest thing we get to justice. If you're listening to this, you already know too much. Or maybe not enough. Either way, you're in it now. Just like I was. Just like we all were. End of file. Sometimes I wonder if the real secret wasn't in what I did, but in who never asked me why. If you've made it this far, subscribe and leave a comment telling me what you knew about this story before you heard it from me. I want to know who's out there and who still dares to remember.